All right, it's looking like the trickle of guests is slowing down, so maybe we can go ahead and get started. Thank you again for joining us today. I'm Katie Blizzard, the Managing Director of eLaboratories. I'd just like to take a quick moment to introduce you to the work that we do. We're an online learning community for editing and recovery practitioners, as well as anyone just interested in making source materials accessible and discoverable. And we have a variety of free resources like courses and workshops like these that we like to make available to make it possible for you to do the work that you want to do. But we also welcome any ideas you may have of content that you'd like to see that would help advance your work. And with that, I'll turn it over to the Collection Builder team to introduce themselves and get us started today.
Hi,
Hey,
everybody.
go ahead. Yeah.
Oh,
uh,
I'll start. Okay. I'm Julia Stone. I'm a digital scholarship librarian at the University of Idaho and also the community liaison for Collection Builder. I'm going to send the workshop outline in the chat today, and I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves as well.
Hey, I'm Olivia Weichel. I'm the head of digital scholarship and initiatives at Iowa State University. I'm new here at Iowa State. I worked at University of Idaho for 5 years and helped develop Collection Builder and still work very closely on Collection Builder. I'm excited to be here with you today. Thanks for coming.
And I'm Evan Williamson, digital infrastructure librarian and the head of digital scholarship and open strategies at University of Idaho. And I work very closely with Julia and used to work very closely with Olivia and still do on a regular basis. And just going to put our digital collections in there because those are all built with Collection Builder, which is our topic for today. And I think I'm starting out and I'm going to share my screen, which is this one. Okay, so today we're going to talk about Collection Builder Sheets, which is a pretty new template that we have. So in Collection Builder, there's actually a series of templates. These are essentially projects of source code here. This is what it looks like, the template itself, that you can make a copy of and create your own project to build a digital collection by adding your own metadata and by adding your own objects into it. And so Collection Builder Sheets is kind of a unique one where this is what it's going to look like when you get there to the demo site. The metadata actually is going to load not directly from that project, but from a live source somewhere on the web, which coincidentally could be a live Google Sheet that you're collaborating with folks on. So that's the really idea there is opens up some really interesting possibilities for prototyping collections with collaborators, with your students in kind of real time and be able to see the changes that happen and change those metadata that are running that site. And so if you get to the Collection Builder Sheets, in this case, the demo site doesn't have any metadata kind of configured to load automatically. And so it opens up this little pop-up window that tells you about how to make metadata and how to publish your Google Sheet and how to actually use that metadata to populate this collection. And so we have a choice here of some demo metadata, and I'm just going to choose one of them here and then submit it. And it's going to literally go out, grab that metadata off the internet and pull it into this collection. And then the JavaScript is going to essentially parse that CSV. CSV is a comma separated values. It's a kind of spreadsheet format that's really good for interoperability. And it's going to parse that format or all of that metadata in the CSV spreadsheet and just start generating the collection for us. And so your metadata gets chewed up and turned in to all of these little elements that appear on the website, on the digital collection site. And so each row of your spreadsheet is essentially an item. That item metadata is going to be represented in a lot of different ways. So we have it here as a little card representing these various PDFs. Here's one that's representing an image item. So here's kind of your metadata, the title. This is going to be the file name, obviously, the image that you can look at. And then here's all your metadata represented for the users to read and interact with and understand. That metadata also can be chewed up in different ways. Like this is looking down a single field inside of your metadata and counting up all the unique values and then representing them in this word crowd based on the count. So how many there is. So the biggest subject in here is this Psychiana staff. And if I click on that subject, I can go look at the related items that have that subject in their metadata. Likewise with the locations, and we can also do that with a map. So if the items have a lat long on them, they're going to get parsed and put onto the map. And then there'll be a little representation of those items so that we can explore those pathways through the metadata, through these items in a whole bunch of different modalities in different ways. And then timeline, we're just putting it down if they have a date. And then there's a table that we can sort and look at in different ways. And then finally, there's also an about page. In a demo site, there's obviously not going to be interpretive content, but the idea would be in your own custom site that interpretive content is really important to us in terms of being able to communicate what this collection is all about, how it came together, the stories that are in there. And so you can write interpretive content with that collection, with those the metadata. So that's kind of the really basic intro to Sheets. What I said, what I was trying to say is that the neat thing about this is that you can link it up to a live Google Sheet. And what that means is that we can have a live Google Sheet where we're actually working on that metadata in real time. If we want to load fresh metadata, we can actually just open this into a new window, and essentially it throws out the metadata that it's loaded, and we can add, it'll refresh the metadata, or we can try a different set of metadata. So here's exactly that same repository that we were looking at, and now we're looking at the mines, Carleton Watkin mines instead. And so there's a lot of interesting use cases that come up with that. And one example that that I've done is this digital exhibit lab. And so this is a project where we had a history classroom, and they come in and they want to have a whole archival research to digital collection experience. So they have some questions about the kind of research that they're going to be doing in history. They go into the archives and they select relevant mining documents and images. They actually digitize it, and then they write the metadata for it. And then this gave us the opportunity that each member could write their own metadata spreadsheet in Google Sheets following the template that we set up for them. They can test their own little kind of individual collection by using the options that are built in here with this change metadata tab. They can link their own sheet and see if their metadata works, or if it doesn't work, or if they need to fix some things. And then in the end, they submit their metadata, and we put it all together into a single collection. But this is the Digital Exhibit Lab is just a setup where I've taken that kind of concept. We have a lot of the content here about how that assignment worked, essentially, and so that other people could reuse it in a number of different types of contexts. But that was just one really interesting example where the students can actually see their metadata in action. They can see the problems that they have. They can start to see if the map is in the wrong place. A lot of times you'll have a lat long reversed or a missing negative, and suddenly you have stuff in Antarctica rather than in Moscow, Idaho. So there's it's a really great learning tool and collaboration tool to see their changes in the metadata in real time, and see how that affects the visualization of that metadata, the visualization of that collection in the digital collection site. So I'm going to do this one really quick. These slides are there so you can go and take a look at them on your own. But I just wanted to give a little bit more background. It's going to load for a second there for some reason. All right, there we go. About the kind of technical side of Collection Builder, just to keep that clear what it is. Keep in mind that you can do a lot of Collection Builder Sheets without really doing any technical knowledge of how it works. So, but the idea is what you have is your metadata in a CSV. In the case of Collection Builder Sheets, you might have it actually just as a published Google Sheet. So it's got to be a CSV metadata. You have a folder of objects. Sometimes those objects don't need to be in that project at all. They can be somewhere on the web. And you have a template, in this case, Collection Builder Sheets. And so that template is kind of the basic code and modular parts that get reused to build those sites. And then we have a static web generator called Jekyll. And that's what takes all of these ingredients here, knits them together, and then it outputs a static website. And so if you do this on your local machine, you actually need to have that as a piece of software installed. But most people use it on GitHub Pages, which is a free building service that can build and host any basic static website on GitHub for free. And so this is something that just happens automatically in the background for you on GitHub, and then you get a static site that you can go and visit and interact with. There's no admin interface. If you're familiar with WordPress, if you're familiar with Omeka, if you're familiar with other kinds or Content DM, other kinds of content management or DAM systems where you actually log into that admin interface and you need to interact with it with that that interface, that doesn't exist because it's a static website. There's no server-side programming language. There's no database on the server. There's no content management system. It's really radically simplified, which means it's just a very different way of interacting with it. Instead, the focus is really going to be on digitizing your objects or curating them from some other source, writing the metadata, and then actually customizing the site would look like this. You have to edit some code that we've designed to be very learnable. But with Collection Builder Sheets, really what it generally looks like is this, working in a spreadsheet. We really focus on that.
Evan?
Yeah, go ahead.
May I interrupt? There's a question in the chat asking, can the hard file also be your hard drive?
I'm going to get to that in a bit. And so I was just holding off on that one. We're going to talk about objects in the next couple breaths. So why would you do that? I'm not going to get really deep into that, but there is a philosophy behind this kind of minimal computing and pulling back on all of the infrastructure that's needed to build a digital collection. There's all kinds of cool stuff that you should read there, but we don't really need to get to that for this Collection Builder Sheets workshop. But just know that we did think a lot about it, and there is some really big advantages. So the ingredients that go into that are going to be a version control system called Git, the platform called GitHub, and that's pretty much what you would work on today. And then GitHub Pages is the free hosting that we have to build these websites for free. The other part about that is the static generator, a programming language called Ruby. Bundler is a Ruby dependency management, and then Jekyll is the thing that actually builds out the site. If you're going to work on GitHub, you don't need to know anything about any of those. That just kind of happens for you. And then the third part is that project template. Again, we're going to use Collection Builder Sheets today. And so there's just a template of source code that has HTML, JavaScript, CSS, Liquid. It's literally just a folder of text files that are ready to be have your content put into it that Jekyll can transform into the digital collection site. And so that's just to give you a kind of breakdown at a really high level. But what we need to do now is change to, we'll talk about the objects. There's a bunch of links in here to our docs. The docs are very comprehensive. They're designed for learning because we really want to support this as a learning endeavor. That's what Collection Builder is all about, is learning, building skills, and then being able to reuse it in lots of different ways. So the docs are really almost walkthrough step by step from the beginning to the end of creating a collection. So there's a lot of the links in here. And so there's going to be certain types of objects that you can use in Collection Builder Sheets. It's basically, the guidelines are in there, but really it's like JPEGs, PNGs, PDFs, and MP3s. Plus you can host things in YouTube and Vimeo, or you could just have links to things that are elsewhere. There's no sort of thumbnails generated, so you don't really want to use like full size huge images for this. you're going to be using just kind of small, reasonable size images that are okay to load on the web. This is really for prototyping. It's not really necessarily like a full-blown, robust kind of digital collection site. And then there's some importance to how you name your files. You need to have your file names be really consistent and clean, no spaces, no weird characters in them. I would use underscores instead of spaces. And so you just want to be really consistent, because on the web, file names have to exactly match what's in your metadata. Case sensitive, space sensitive. The extensions need to be exactly the same. And those are the #1 problems with things not loading up. It will be like using JPEG rather than JPG and stuff like that. They have to match exactly. And then the last thing that the question hinted at is where should I put my objects? And there's a couple different ways to do it. When you're prototyping, generally you kind of need to have your objects somewhere else hosted on the web. You can't it has to be web accessible though. And so you can't just have it on your machine, because the web can't go and pull things off of your hard drive and then put it on the web unless you're running a little web server on your computer. And so with Sheets prototyping, we'll actually has to be somewhere web accessible essentially. And so you could put it up on GitHub. You can put it in your project repository if you create your own copy, and you can add the objects, the image files, the PDFs and stuff, into a folder called the objects folder. That's kind of where it expects to find them. Or you can just have a link. So if I go to, say, one of our digital collections, and I want to I want to feature this report in my collection, I can just copy this link right here. So this link is just a direct link to a PDF. I can use this link, some random object that's in another digital collection somewhere else. I can use that inside of my metadata field to pull that into my collection. And the same thing with images. So I could use this image. So I want to copy the link to that image. And so this is a direct link to an image on the web. I can use this image in my collection as well, just by copying that link. And the other one that works really well are links to YouTube or Vimeo, because video files are obviously really big. So we just use those platforms to simplify hosting those things. So there can be a little bit of a chicken and an egg when you're prototyping a collection in terms of like where to put your objects when you're getting started. But generally we will put them on a web server somewhere. We'll put them in a GitHub repository somewhere, and then just link to them there. And you can have them on your local machine only if you pull down your template onto your machine and you actually have Jekyll installed and you're building it locally on your machine. You could have it local only, but that's not where we're not going to cover that in this workshop today, but it is totally possible. Okay, the question really was in there, do we build everything with Sheets? No, we build everything with Collection Builder, but we build it with a different template called Collection Builder CSV, a customized version of that, which is a slightly different approach to everything. Sheets is our kind of really learning focused, really prototyping focused version of the template that's really simplifying things to make it easy to interact and collaborate and change the metadata. Once you get to the point of building out more complex digital collections, Collection Builder CSV is the one that's really robust, generates derivatives, can be customized in a lot of different ways. And so that's what we actually use in our house. And the other question that's a good one is if you have stuff on Content DM, you just copy the image and file URLs. Exactly, that's a really good use case. That's what we do with our students in that mining the archive is a lot of times we have a part of the assignment is go and curate objects out of different digital collections and just pull in those using the API or the image links that are provided by those platforms like Omeka or any kind of, or Content DM or any other kind of repository system. And then the other one that is one important one to cover is there a limit to the number of objects and files that you can host on GitHub? And yes, GitHub has kind of soft limits. That's in our docs. It's about a gig total for your whole repository project. So you want to keep your folder of objects to about probably under 500 megs, which is still quite a lot of items, because for this type of collection with Collection Builder Sheets, you don't want to build like, 20,000 item collections. So, and you want to have smaller item sizes so that they're reasonable for people to download and use on the web. So 500 is going to go pretty long. 500 megs is going to go a pretty long way for this type of collection. So that was pretty whirlwind, but I hope that you get a good concept of like what Sheets is for, how it kind of works technically. You have a sense of that. And we're going to walk through all of that right now so you can actually really see it in action. But I'll give you one last chance to ask kind of high-level questions about Collection Builder Sheets before I turn it to Julia to walk through.
I think there was one more question about content DM.
Oh yeah, I answered that one. I think
Oh, that one you
was
answered.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you can totally link. You can use items in Content DM. That's a great use case. That's what we yeah, like I said, that's what we do with our students. So that's one thing that we think is really powerful, kind of like learning opportunity, and is curating things from other collections and then bringing them together in a different context. It's also something that we've seen people do out there where they have massive collections of, say, documents, and they want to bring together an exhibit of, this very topical set of things out of those massive collections. And so they'll build a collection builder collection that's really curating off of a different platform in a more contextual way, and what I would call sort of an exhibit. So that's a really powerful and useful use case as well.
And I just got a direct message question. Is this like Omeka?
In some ways, it can be like Omeka, but it is not. Omeka is a content management system. So you're going to have, it's something that is installed on the server. It has you're going to need to have a server. You're going to have to install it unless you use their hosted service. You're going to be able to log in, and you're going to have other people logging into that system to do a lot of that work. There is no server to log into with Collection Builder. The work is just going to take place in spreadsheets. So it's a very different kind of approach to digital collections at Omeka, but it has very similar use cases in many cases. And so there's kind of some trade-offs there in terms of what you want your students to be focusing on and learning. Having content management skills is not a bad thing either, but there's a lot more overhead involved in using Omeka in terms of maintaining infrastructure for the long term. Collection Builder is a slightly different approach, and it's going to change the focus of the skills that you learn and how you can collaborate. And so you can stage Collection Builder Sheets in a lot of different ways. If you want them to learn about web developing, you can actually totally integrate this in. If you want them to just learn about editing spreadsheets, you can really stage it in a way that they're just editing spreadsheets. And so there's a lot of different opportunities and different ways to stage that collaboration. And Olivia's done a lot of teaching with it as well. So yeah, feel free to jump in on that.
So yeah, I think we're ready for the next part, which is when we're going to start using the prototyping features of Collection Builder Sheets. Just in case people lost the link to the outline or just joined, I'm going to put it one more time in the chat so we can follow along. And in these next two parts, the part I'm leading and then the part Olivia is leading, we have like little 5-minute work times kind of set in there. So if you feel like, oh, oops, I'm like falling behind or something, you don't have to like follow along with me. You could take that 5 minutes to like do the steps on your own and instead just watch me the first time. It's really whatever you find most helpful as you're learning. But we're just going to go through these steps together. And we actually have some pre-made demo metadata that we're going to use. But if you did come to this with like a collection in mind, with a Google Sheet of your own metadata, feel free to try using that in this in these steps as well. So the first step that we're going to do is just make a copy of this Google Sheet. So you can click on the link here, and this is our Watkins Mine collection. And so it's just going to prompt you like to make a copy. So I'm going to make a copy of it. You will need to be like signed into Google Drive. So it should just automatically make a copy of this Google Sheet in your Google Drive. So the next thing that we're going to do is actually publish this Google Sheet to the web. So this is like what Evan was talking about, where we need a link to this CSV that is like live on the web that we can put into our Google Sheets collection. So I'm going to click on File. Here, I'm going to zoom in a little bit since it's kind of really small. Okay, so I'm going to click on File, and then I'm going to click, well, I'm going to hover over Share, and then click Publish to Web. So now the one thing I need to change here is we're in the link tab, but we need to change from web page to CSV, comma separated values. So I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to click Publish. And it's going to ask if I'm sure that I want to publish this sheet, and I say okay. And now I'm going to copy this link. So this is the link to our sheet content available on the web. So I'm just going to copy. And then the next part is going to be going back to our outline. And we're going to be using this default template site that Evan was showing earlier. So we can open this site here. And now we're going to use the metadata CSV link, so the Google Sheet that we just published to the web, and paste in the full URL. So this is just exactly what I just copied. I'm going to paste it. You can see the full link is all here, and I can just click Submit. And so once I click Submit, it's going to be pulling all of that metadata from the sheet that we published, and you'll see a bunch of Watkins Mine objects and images that are in this sheet. So you can see here all of our objects. If we browse through, there's 80 items reflecting, the 80 items that are in here. And we can look through and see all of our metadata reflected on the item pages. So one really cool thing about this, and you'll see in this top right, is that we have the option in this like prototyping mode to refresh our metadata and to change our metadata. So if I had a different sheet and I was like, actually, I want to see what this sheet looks like, I could just pop it in here and all of my objects would reflect those changes. The other really cool thing is that if I make a change to this Google Sheet, and then click refresh metadata, it will show those changes on the site. So it's a really, really quick way to kind of immediately see changes as you're prototyping and adding things in. So I'm going to actually make like a test change to one of these objects. The object ID of Watkins 0. This is the title of the object. I'm going to, instead of changing the title, I'm going to change a little bit in the description of the object. So I'm going to click here in the cell for description. And I'm just going to type something like, this is a test change. And then you'll see up here that my sheet is saving, and it's now saved, and it has this new little bit of text here. So to see this change reflected, I'm actually going to copy the title of this and find it in my collection. So if I browse our items and I look here in the search bar for this item, I'm going to search it. And you can see here, this is the item that I changed. If I click on it, you're going to notice, oh, the change isn't there yet. And that's because I haven't refreshed the metadata using the refresh metadata button. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh it. Sometimes for some reason, my computer likes it like wants it to do it a couple times. Is it gonna do it for me? Let me make sure, because I was running into this issue yesterday where it was like unpublishing it or something. Okay, refresh. Okay, so it finally showed up. I don't know if it's an issue with like my stuff, but like for some reason I've had to refresh it a lot. But you can see that my test change did eventually show up in the description here after I hit refresh metadata. And so you can make other changes to any of the fields of the metadata and then refresh it to see those changes. So you could even, yeah, you can change the title, you can change the date, whatever fields that you want to try changing, and then practice just like refreshing and finding where those changes are reflected. So that's sort of the nifty thing about Sheets is that, you know, a lot of people could be working on this this live Google Sheet and making changes, and then also being able to see those changes, you know, from your collaborators on a prototype site like this. So that is sort of the intro to the prototyping site. The other thing is that you can share a link to your test site with other people. But at this time, I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of time to just like practice. If you were following along with me, you can start, or if you weren't following along with me, you can start from the top and like publish your spreadsheet, add it to the site. Or you can just practice like adding some changes to the spreadsheet and then refreshing your metadata and seeing those changes. And if anyone has any questions at this time too, this would be a great time to put them in chat or unmute yourself. I see that some of the things have been asked in chat already. Let me see. And yeah, I tried caching or clearing my cache right before this. I can try doing it in a new window. That might also help with the refresh. Let me see. Oh yeah, and I got a question in a direct message. Are the images hosted on a local server and the links in your spreadsheet you publish are leading to that server and pulling from that server? Yes. So in our example metadata here, if we look at our Watkins, you'll see in this file name column that these are actually links to our University of Idaho libraries server. So if I click on this, it's a link to the image hosted on our server. And so this enables it to work with our prototyping Sheet site because they are hosted elsewhere. Because with the way that this is set up, that I'm changing the metadata and stuff, there's not actually a way to like add my objects in, you know, to this. So that's why the file names do need to be externally hosted objects, if that makes sense. Any other questions? And I'll continue to let you all kind of play around with that. Let me know if you run into any issues or have any questions. Oh yeah, someone asked, I noticed the column in your sheet has mine, depth, etc. Is it possible for those to display in the item info? So for the part that Olivia does, yes, you'll be able to edit a file. It's called the config metadata file to get those to show up. In this prototyping one, correct me if I'm wrong, Evan and Olivia, but I don't think there's a way to get those custom fields to show up.
Yeah, for the obviously with the prototyping one, there's just the whatever was The base template is what is configured, which is kind of just the really basic fields. Once you set it up, like if you want to set up your own instance for your particular class and your particular metadata, that's when you set it up and you configure the custom fields so that you can display whatever you want. And so, but that takes a little bit of configuration on GitHub to get all of that to show up. So that would be the case when this is just kind of like really for testing your metadata, see if it works at all. When you want to start building your own collection with its, own custom title and custom metadata that displays, that's when you create your own copy of the template and host your own site.
And that's what Olivia will be showing in the next part. But that's a good question. So I'll give you all just like 1 or 2 more minutes, and then we can move on to this last part. And then Olivia will be showing us how to start our own instance of a CB Sheets collection. All right, feel free to keep working, but I am going to move on to step 6 here, which is sharing your test site via URL. So it is possible to share, this test version of your site. All you need to do is put in the link to your live Google Sheet CSV right after this equals sign of this rest of this URL here. So for example, if my live link, which I get from doing file, share, publish to web, CSV, if I copy this link, so I'm going to do copy, and then I put it at the end of, say, my metadata URL, this would be the full link to share to my collection, to my test collection. So if I copy this whole thing and open it in a new tab, it should load in the metadata from that CSV. So you can see that, I have my test site with all of these mine images just from putting that right at the end of the CSV equals. Does anyone have any questions about that, about like sharing this test site? You can easily just, pop in another CSV at the end here and be able to see it populate this test template. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that so you can see where, your metadata URL would go. And we have a little warning here that the metadata URL can't have like any extra like symbols in it because that will cause like the parsing to fail. And so it just needs to be exactly that link. So this is really great to be able to, you can share this test site with your collaborators who maybe, are working on other aspects of the project, but like want to see what it looks like so far. It's a way for them to just, quickly see how it's coming together. Any questions about any of this, this like prototyping part of using CB Sheets? The next part is, of course, going to go into like making a copy of this template and actually like setting up your own instance where you can change the title and like customize, what metadata is showing up, etc. But this can be a really great way if you're using this in the classroom, for instance, students could see just quickly how their metadata is being presented in a collection without having to do a lot of the extra like coding work and the GitHub configurations. And if there are no questions, I can let Olivia take over and share her screen. Looks like we're a little ahead of schedule even, which is weird for us.
Okay, I'm just gonna get set up here. And I'm not always great about watching the chat, so feel free to jump in and stop me if I need to stop and answer something. So what Julia's described is a great exercise for having students, switch between different CSVs quickly, or try out their metadata that they've created in an impermanent way. You might be working in a situation, teaching in a classroom or teaching a workshop where you want to actually have your own site that people can update their metadata and see the changes happen quickly with. And so in order to do that, you actually need to copy this template into your own GitHub account and turn on GitHub Pages, which will serve it live, and then connect your one metadata spreadsheet that you can then continue to edit. So that's what we're going to talk about in my section. There's lots of different use cases for this. It can be collaborating on a DH project with many different people. It can be in the classroom again. It can be working with colleagues on a project. So it's really set up to work with collaborators in a way that removes obstacles that they might have to understanding GitHub or uploading or tweaking things actually in the GitHub interface. They can just work directly in the metadata itself. So in order to get started, I'm going to have you make sure that you're logged into GitHub, and I'll be doing similarly to Julia, kind of doing a little bit of work and kind of going slowly. So if you do want to follow along, you can, but we do have some 5-minute breaks thrown in here as well. So you can also just watch and then catch up and ask questions during those work times. So make sure you're logged into GitHub, and then I'll put this link in the chat here. Go over to our CollectionBuilder-SHEETS template. It's also linked in the agenda down on page 3, I think. Where are we? Here, yeah. So under my section here, the 950 section, it's this number 3 copy CollectionBuilder-SHEETS template. So once you're here, you can look for the green use this template button. Again, that won't show up if you're not logged into GitHub, so do make sure you're logged in. Then click that button, and you'll want to say create a new repository. And I'm going to zoom in so you can see a little better. So create a new repository. And this is just going to copy all of this code, and I'll get it set up with my new repository name, and then I'll have access to this code on my own account and can edit it and do what I want with it. So keep in mind as you name your repository that using the GitHub Pages method of serving your site means that your repository name is going to be in the URL for your site. So that means you don't want any special characters, no spaces, best to keep it all lowercase. You can use hyphens or underscores if you want. So I'll do sheets demo. And you can title it anything you want to. You can add a little description if you want to. You can always add that in later as well, so no need to do it right now. And you want to keep your repository public, which is going to allow us to serve it for free on GitHub Pages. So once you have that filled in, you can go ahead and click Create Repository. And sometimes it takes a minute to generate. But once it does, you should have a repository that looks like this. For those new to the GitHub interface, what you're looking at is GitHub, which is a platform to store and collaborate with code on the cloud. So within your repository, you have a series of folders and files. Underneath these folders and files is a README that describes what your project is. So you can edit the README once you get your project up and running to tell visitors what's going on here. We're gonna, to get started, actually turn on GitHub Pages right now because it can take sometimes a few minutes to update. So GitHub Pages is GitHub's service that will take a Jekyll site and serve it for free on the web. And that's what Collection Builder Sheets and Collection Builder GH make use of. And it's really great, a really great option, especially if you don't have a lot of resources or time or money to, maintain your own server. So in order to do that, you're going to look over on the right, up in the top. I'm in the top navigation bar here, and I'm looking for the settings button that has a little cog in front of it. I'm going to click on that. And this is just sort of the general settings of your repository, but I'm looking over on the left hand navigation bar here for the pages section. So it's kind of in the middle towards the bottom, pages over on the left. If you click on that, that takes you to this GitHub Pages place where you can turn on GitHub Pages. And so you're going to kind of skip down to where it says branch right here. And it says GitHub Pages is currently disabled, but we want to turn it on. And so we're going to click on the button that says no, that says none. It has a drop down. If you click the drop down, it gives you the option to select the main branch, which is the only branch in your repository right now. So go ahead and select main, and leave the next drop down the same, but as it is, and then click save. So now your GitHub Pages website is generating. You won't see the URL here, but I'll show you where to find it. You can go back to that first landing page we were on in our repository. And that to get there, you'll look for the code button that's over on the left side of the navigation bar. And you're gonna, once you get back here, look for the About section. So that'll be over on your right. There's no description right now, but you can add that. And you can also add, most importantly, your GitHub Pages website URL here. So to the right of About, you're looking for a little cog. If you click that cog, that's like the settings for the About. You can add your description. And then what we want right now is to add our website URL. So you don't have to type anything in, actually. You can just click this check mark next to use your GitHub Pages website, and that will just automatically add the website URL that is building for your site that we just turned on. So click that check mark, click Save Changes. And now I can see that my URL is right here. I can also see that my website is built, and I can see that because there's this little green check mark that when I hover over it, it says it's success right now. So before that, it was a little orange dot that we'll have a chance to see when we do updates in the future. But you can always kind of look there to see what the status of your website is, if it's being served and everything's going well. If it failed, you'll see a red cross, and then if it's in the process of building, you'll see a little orange symbol there. So I'm going to go ahead and look at my site by clicking on this URL that I just got to show up here. Open it in a new tab. And what you're seeing is exactly the same template that Julia was showing you. So the difference here is going to be that instead of adding our metadata through the modal that pops up here, we're actually going to add it, hard code it into the code itself. But we'll still be able to edit that Google Sheet and see the changes show up on the site. So I'm not going to make any changes to the front end of the site right now. I'm going to go back to my GitHub repository, and I'm going to edit the site, or add my my metadata URL for where it's published from here. But before I do that, I'm noticing that there is time for work right now because we just went through a lot of steps to set up our GitHub Pages site. So let's take a few minutes, and everyone can practice setting up their own, copying a template, setting up GitHub Pages using the steps I just followed, and definitely jump in if you have questions. We can walk through things together.
And one thing we just like to say is, I mean, part of the cool, fun part about working on GitHub like this is that don't be afraid to just create sites and delete them. this is a free service, and they're not going to stop you from creating lots of extra sites, and you can always delete it. So don't have that hesitation like, oh, I don't want to create just another website. Well, it's totally fine. This is a great way to learn to create an example, mess around with it. If it's broken, you can just delete it and be done, and then try again. Or you can create things, use them temporarily, and then delete it or archive it. And so I just sometimes there's a little bit of hesitation like, oh, I can't create more stuff, but this is totally open, able to do that. So that's part of the fun part about that, owning a little piece of the web. Does anybody have questions about creating a repository from the template? How to name your cool project?
I like the suggestions that GitHub gives. They're always like really weird. I wanted to point out that GitHub also has really nice documentation about like if you can like search in it for like things like repositories or like deleting a repository if you want to delete your repository, or if you want to like start a GitHub organization, or you know, there's just like a lot to learn within GitHub itself. So you can kind of browse through those as well.
Yeah, well, I can jump back in and continue on. Hopefully you all have some exciting new GitHub pages sites set up. If you do need any help or want, you know, want some questions answered, definitely put some notes in the chat or chime in, just unmute and we can, if you have questions, others might have them too. So troubleshooting is always good to do together. But I will go ahead and share my screen. Back to it. All right. So now we want to add our collection data, and you have, as Evan was describing with objects earlier, you do have the option to add your objects. In the case of this workshop, we have a few metadata spreadsheets for you to choose from for this exercise that already have links to objects being served elsewhere. But I do want to point out that if you were doing this on your own and you had your own objects, you can host them through GitHub in the objects folder. So as I'm looking in the code down here, I can see all of these directories or folders. And if I look down towards the middle of the repository, I see the objects folder. And this would be where you would add your objects. So you can go to add file, upload files, and that will let you add them. I'm not going to do that today because those links are in our metadata. So I'm going to go back to the base of my repository by clicking on code up here and jump over to the metadata spreadsheet. So we have several metadata spreadsheets linked in the agenda here for to choose from besides the Watkins spreadsheet that we used for the original exercise that Julia did. So choose one of these if you're following along. And I'm going to pick the Psychiana, the first one, which is a digital collection at University of Idaho about a mail order religion. Pretty interesting. So I have the ability to copy that spreadsheet. And just to show you what we're looking at here, the file name column is links to all of the objects on the University of Idaho server. If you had put your own objects into the objects folder, like I just showed you, you would want to make sure to put a path to those objects, to the objects folder, or to the objects as they exist in the objects folder in the file name field. So that would look something like objects, file name, JPEG. And we did link to documentation for that in the agenda for today. And you can also find it pretty easily on our Collection Builder docs website. So check that out. Feel free to jump in with questions if you have them. But right now everything's linked, so I'm not going to worry about objects. What I am going to do is walk through that step of publishing my spreadsheet again. So if I go to File and look for the Share option and then say Publish to Web. And I'm leaving everything the same except for I'm changing web page to comma separated values. And then I'll press publish. And now it's giving me the option to copy this newly published spreadsheet. So I'm going to do it. I'll press Command C to copy on my computer. You can also right click and say copy. And then go back over to your repository. And now we're actually going to edit a file in our GitHub repository. So what we're looking for here is our config YAML file. So if you scroll down, it's towards the bottom of your repository. It starts with an underscore, has the name config.yml. And if you click on that file, now we're looking at a plain text file through the GitHub interface. And if you'll notice right now, I can't actually make any edits. So I can click and I can read this file, but I can't actually edit it yet. But this is a file that we are going to edit. So in order to do that, there are a few ways, but the way I'll show you right now is to click this little pencil button that's over in the top right. If you click that button, that'll jump into the editor now. So I do have the option to edit here. You'll notice that the text is not wrapped, so it kind of goes off the page. You can easily toggle on wrap or no wrap up in the top right. So I'm going to turn on soft wrap so it's easier to read here. And what you're looking at here is a data format called the YAML. And there's three things you need to know. The first is the file is composed of a series of comments that are indicated by a hash at the beginning of a line. So that's what you're seeing right off the bat here is this little description at the top that says what this file is. And then we've helpfully separated out sections of this file and labeled them according to kind of what variables you're filling in. So the rest of the file that's not a comment is made up of key value pairs. And this is the important part. This is what Jekyll is actually using to build out your site. So this file in particular is one of the first that Jekyll needs in order to create your site. So it's where the very foundational aspects of your website are looked for first, and then the site is built out from here. So it's important that you get sort of the site settings, the URLs all put into in the metadata, which is what we'll do right now, into this file so that your site can be built out correctly. So if I scroll down, everything's a comment until I get to, and on my screen, it's a blue little bit of text before a colon, and then there after the colon is a value. So what you're seeing, the blue text is our key, the text after the colon is the value. So it's the kind of the value of that key or that variable that then is filled in throughout the site. And I'm going to ignore most of them right now. You can fill in a lot of this on your own time, but I'm going to stop at title first and just retitle my site. So I'm looking for it's line 23 for the title line. I'm not going to edit the word title itself. I'm going to jump to the right of it, delete Collection Builder Sheets, and say Sheets demo. So this is what's going to appear as the title of your site. I can show you what that looks like here. So right here is what we're editing. And then you can edit the tagline underneath the title to give a little more information. You can also edit the description. All of these are available to edit in the site settings portion of your config. So that's good to do right off the bat. I'm just going to do title right now for the sake of time. You can also switch out Collection Builder for your name or your GitHub username. So good to let folks know who built the site, who's responsible for it. But the most important thing that I need right now is actually this collection settings section. So under here, there's a lot of documentation that says what actually goes in this section. So that's good to read, good to refresh your memory if you're coming back after a while and aren't quite sure the format of what to put here. But what we need right now is just to fill in this metadata CSV key with a value. So I'm going to add my metadata CSV that I just published from Google. I'm just going to paste it right in there. And that's all I'm going to do for now. I edited the title and I added my metadata. So adding this published CSV once I've committed my changes is going to allow me to and my collaborators to make changes in that CSV on Google Sheets, and then for me to refresh my site and see those changes show up. And then go on to then edit the rest of my site to be a little bit more customized. So I'm good with this file for now. So what I can do is called making a commit. So in GitHub, whenever we change a file, we have to leave a little message, a little snippet of text that says, this is the change that I made at this point in time. That's both for yourself to know what changes you made, but also for your collaborators if you're working with other folks, so they know what you've been doing in the repository. So the commit changes button is up on the top right. It's green, it's pretty visible. So click on that. And it fills in a little commit message for you. But I usually like to make my own that's a little bit more descriptive. So I'm going to say add Psychiana metadata. You can add an extended description if you want to. I don't typically do that, but it is an option. And once you're ready, you can click, no other changes need to be made. You can click commit changes. So now if I go back to the base of my repository, I can click on the name here on the code button. So I can see a few things. I can see that this is my latest commit message. So I can see the last thing that I did. To the right of that, I can see this little pending orange thing that says your site is now rebuilding. So that's going to change to a green check mark again pretty soon. I can see there's only been 2 commits to this entire repository. The first one was just the creation of the repository, and the second one was my latest commit. So I can also see where that commit was made if I scroll down in the middle column of this code presentation here. All of these are initial commit until I get to config YAML, and I can see I made a change to that just now. If you want to see what that commit was, Git is tracking your changes. So you can click on your commit message and then jump into the code and see, oh yeah, I changed the title at that point. I changed the author, and this is when I added my metadata. So that's really good for your future self to have to come back and see what changes you made, maybe you broke something. So you need to know what happened at that point. So definitely make use of the commits. But now my metadata is uploaded and I should be able to view the changes. So I'm going to show you that real quick and then give you some time to work. So you've uploaded your metadata. I'll show you if you click out to your site, then now my metadata for Psychiana is showing up instead of that modal that was appearing before. So we'll talk more. I'll show you more, but I'll stop my share so we can see if anyone has questions. If you want to get caught up, feel free to take a little moment to work.
So I'm going to make a disclaimer before we go into this next part to view the live changes of metadata. We're seeing a very different behavior from Sheets right now than normal. It's not refreshing in the background. It's not in the template, and it's not in your browser. It's literally at Google Sheets seems to be caching older versions of it and not updating them immediately. And I just did a whole bunch of testing, and yeah, it's like Google Sheets itself is just not refreshing in the background, and I keep getting old versions of the published sheet. So we've never run into this before today, so we're a little bit weirded out. And I'm not quite sure what's going on, if it's just like Google Sheets is having a little down day, or if they change something in the way that they update it in the background. But it doesn't seem like you can get the fresh metadata immediately. It takes a little while and a couple different hits before it actually will refresh the fresh metadata. So I'm not 100% sure what to make of that yet, but we're probably going to run into this frustration in a minute.
Not the best timing.
Anyone have any questions? Hopefully things are going okay. I'll take like one more minute and then get started again. All right, well, I'm going to jump in and share my screen. And so we'll see. I'm going to make some changes to my metadata now and see if we can see those changes. So this is a spreadsheet that I just published this copy of Psychiana demo. And I can edit anything in this spreadsheet. So if you were a student or if you're a collaborator, you'd probably be going down the line, editing your all of your fields for all of your objects. I'm going to just pick a title and say test change, and then maybe pick, maybe I'll just stick with the audio for now. So I've just edited a couple changes or a couple titles in my metadata. So if Google Sheets updates, then I should be able to jump back to my new Sheets website. So this is the one that I've just accessed from my GitHub repository, and go back to, I'll just start from the home page and then click on the refresh metadata button. And now I'm just going to pull up my audio objects and see, and it does look like that showed up. So I can see this object now has a new title. This object has a new title. I can try to change this third one and say, add another title. Go back over here and see, I'm looking to see if this good news title refreshes. It looks like it doesn't there. There you go. So now all of those titles are changed. So you can make as many changes to your metadata as you want and then refresh your site and see those changes. This is probably a use case where it's kind of a longer, not forever, but longer term project. Maybe it's a semester long project. Maybe it's over the course of a month. You have students creating metadata, and it's really important for them to be able to see what that metadata looks like on the browse page, on the item pages, so that they maybe engage with the project a little bit more. But there are also edits that you can make to the like the way that the site is working and the metadata that's presented here on the item page. We had a question about that. So that's what I'm going to show you in the next section. But before I do that, I'm going to demonstrate what you might do if you get to a point where you've worked with your students, you've worked with your collaborators, they have finished the metadata, it's all looking fantastic, and your site probably won't be worked on that much in the future. So you're ready to just kind of put it up and leave it. If that's the case, you get to that point, you probably don't want to leave your published spreadsheet connected to your, or still generating your metadata for your site. What you probably want to do in that case is actually download your spreadsheet and upload it to your GitHub interface or your GitHub repository, so that your site remains stable for the long term. So Google doesn't go and change something that affects the way that metadata is being pushed to your site. So again, this is something that you do kind of at the end of your project, once you're ready to kind of just leave it up, set it aside, and no more active development is being done on it. Although you can always update that spreadsheet in the future, it just won't be connected live. So what you do at that point is go to back to the base of your repository here. And well, first, actually, you need to download your metadata. So I'm going to jump back to my metadata spreadsheet. This is the one I just made the changes in. It's published live right now. But I want to actually download it as a CSV. In order to do that, I can go to File, Download, and choose comma separated values. And then I'm going to, at this point, you want to do a series of things. You want to rename it, but you don't want to open it. At least you don't want to open it in Excel. We recommend just downloading straight from Google Sheets and then uploading straight into your repository. Excel will do weird things with CSVs because it doesn't do UTF-8 encoding correctly. And so if you open it in Excel and then add it to your GitHub repository, you may see some weird things happen to your site. Your site may break. If that happens to you, it's not the end of the world. Just go back to Google Sheets, re-download it, and then add it to your GitHub repository without opening it in Excel. So I'm going to go to my downloads folder, And then quickly just rename this to Psychiana CSV. Oh, dang it. Make sure you don't already have that name. So Psychiana demo in my case. And then in my repository, I'm going to add it to the assets folder. So some of you might be familiar with Collection Builder, and typically we add metadata to the data folder, but in this case, it's a little bit different. You actually want to add it to your assets folder. So you're looking for assets. It's in the sort of towards the top of your repository. You click into there. You can go ahead and this is what's in the assets folder right now. So in the base of this folder, if you go to the top right and click on add file, upload files, then you can go ahead and drag your the new CSV you just downloaded into your repository or into this drag and drop space. I can see that it got uploaded. It's here. I do want to make a commit. So add Psychiana. And then commit my changes. So just doing that on its own won't actually affect your site. Right now, your site is still being pulled from this metadata spreadsheet that we published. If you remember, we had to configure our config YAML file in order to know where to pull the metadata from. And so we're going to have to go back to that config YAML file and tell it now to look in assets to find that Psychiana CSV that I just uploaded. So I'm going to, again, in the base of my repository, scroll down to config YAML, click on it. Click on the penciled button, it's up in the top right. And I'm going just down to that area that I edited before in your collection settings, looking for that metadata CSV section. And right now I have this published CSV in here. I am going to wrap my text so you can see it better. This published CSV is right here. So I'm just going to delete that. And you can see above this key, there are a few comments, documentation that tell you the different types of things you can put here. The very first one is a relative path. You can also put the published CSV from Google that we looked at. You can put actually a CSV that's hosted on GitHub. So there are different ways to add your metadata here. But right now, I do want to go ahead and put my path to my metadata. It's in assets. But so I just copied that for ease of use. But obviously, my file name is not demo metadata. It's Psychiana demo, I think. Right? Yeah. So if you add that, add your path from your assets folder where we just put our CSV, and then after assets, put the file name of your CSV, and then do include the extension CSV here. That's another difference from our other template versions of Collection Builder. So once you've got that, you should be good to go, and you can go ahead and commit your changes. Click commit. And I'm going to go back to the base of my repository and pending. It's pending again, so it's going to take a minute to update. Oh, and I do want to do an extra step that I just forgot. So while that's updating, I'm going to go back to config YAML. And well, let me just show you actually. So right now, the way that Sheets is, the way that my site is set up here, I have, just refresh. My metadata is connected. I can make those changes before I uploaded my metadata. I could make my changes and refresh using this button here at the top. It says refresh metadata. Probably once you get to the end of your development mode and you're ready to just publish add your metadata spreadsheet without connecting the published version anymore, you don't have students needing to refresh metadata or your collaborators needing to refresh their metadata anymore. So you probably want to take this button out of here because it's not going to do anything, because your metadata is now a CSV file that we just dropped into our GitHub repository. So in order to turn off this button, I'm going to go back to the base of my repository. I'm going to click on config YAML. Again, I'm going to click the pencil button, and then I'm going to scroll down past site settings, past collection settings, down to build settings. And here I'm looking for line 65. So development mode is true. That means that that little button symbol is, and the refresh button is going to be there and active. If I don't want that button to show up anymore, I need to change this to false. So just change the word true to false, and that's all that's required there. I can go back up and commit my changes. So now it's going to rebuild again. Sometimes GitHub just takes, anywhere from 30 seconds to a couple minutes to rebuild a GitHub Pages site. Feel free to jump in with any questions while we're waiting here.
I was gonna jump in to show a couple examples of what I was talking about debugging metadata. So maybe if you could let me share, yeah. So we've been hinting at the kind of fun things that you can do with your students or with yourself to debug your metadata. So I had a copy of the Idaho cities, and I kind of introduced some errors into it. And I've configured it in my test sheets example. And so I have that set, just like Olivia showed you. I'm still set to the live Google Sheet. So I'm just going to open my test site in a private browser window. And so we'll kind of all throw our metadata in there, and then we'll start exploring the site and see what kind of anomalies come up. And so maybe we go to the map. This one's all about Idaho cities, so I assume we should basically just have stuff in Idaho, right? And then we kind of zoom out on this map, and it's looking good. It's all Idaho. We keep zooming out. Oh, and then we have one over here somewhere in China and one in Antarctica, which means that we must have some metadata anomalies. And so just being able to visualize that metadata is going to be surfacing these problems. And so I don't think this is an Idaho town in Mongolia. So that means, okay, go back to the spreadsheet and figure out what's going on. And so the anomaly that's there is, you can see, I just put these in here. You probably can't see, but I have one where the lat and the long are reversed. So I would just need to essentially copy this and put it there, and then do the opposite, get the that one there. So those were reversed. And in this one, you can see that there's just missing a negative sign. So I just have to add that negative in. The other thing that we might look at is we're looking at the one of these clouds, right? And we start to look, this is just looking down that locations column, and it's treating them all as kind of like a controlled vocabulary, and it's going to count up all the instances. And we just kind of, that gives us this really high-end view of all of the metadata in that column. And so we can look at that and we're like, okay, these are all town names. But then there's this one here that's a town name, comma, Idaho. And that doesn't follow the convention that all the rest of them was. So that really quickly surfaces, the anomalies out of that metadata. And we're like, oh, we just wanted that field to just be the town name, not the town name and the state, because these are all Idaho. So that means, okay, go back to the metadata. Oh, here I see it. Yep. Moscow, Idaho rather than Moscow. So then we would go ahead and do our little find and replace. And we want to get rid of Moscow ID and just replace it with Moscow and replace them all. And now we're done with that. And so we can just, by interacting with the site, we're able to surface those anomalies and then be able to go and fix them. So maybe if we refresh this a few times, we'll get it. There we go. So Google took a bit to give us the fresh data, but you can see we made that fix. We can go over the map. We can zoom way out again. Okay, good. Now we have 300 things in Idaho, nowhere else. So those are the kind of things that become really clear to the students, that interaction between the quality of your metadata and the actual end product of the site. And you can see that happen in real time, where it's making that connection between the data and the exhibit, which is really what we're trying to do with this kind of work, with this kind of learning opportunity, with this template.
Great. Thanks, Evan. So go back to my site. I guess we can open it up to questions too after that, or thoughts for folks that have taught or thinking about how they might teach with this. Feel free to jump in if anything occurs to you. I'm going to show now, so you can see my site updated. I have this little green check mark now. So if I go and refresh using the browser refresh, my buttons just went away. So my site is now, the metadata can't be configured from afar. I'd actually need to download the metadata CSV, edit it and put it and add it back in, or reconnect a published Google Sheet. So it's always possible to reconnect another published Google Sheet if you want to. But this is my use case right now. Is I'm finished editing and I'm ready to keep my site up and published for a while. So that's sort of the end of that process. I do want to get into customizing your site. So making customizations to the content of the site rather than just the metadata that's being used to generate everything. You can do that through many different ways that are outlined in our documentation. So I'm not going to get through all of it today, but I am going to show a few things. So the very first customization that we did was in the config YAML file, that we did the title, the tagline, the description there, along with the metadata. But when you get into theming your site, so deciding what subjects are appearing on the homepage, what in general is appearing on the homepage, what appears on the navigation bar, what metadata appears on the item pages, all of that you can do in different places throughout your site, but I'll show you kind of how to get started, where to get started. Probably the first place you want to jump into is in your data folder. So that folder right at the top of your repository. And look for the theme YAML file within that folder. So it's very at the bottom of this data folder, and click into it. Click the pencil button to edit. And you can, this again is YAML, so it looks very similar to our config YAML page. It's separated by portions of the site. So the very first part up here has some instructions for updating things that have to do with the home page. The next section is about the item page. Next are about subjects and locations clouds. You can edit the map, the timeline, and so on. So the thing you might want to update first is, I'm going to go ahead and wrap my text here. What should I do? Maybe you can change the where your map is located. So if you want to zoom out your map or relocate it, if there's objects elsewhere, so I can see, so by default, when I land on my map, it's zoomed into Moscow, Idaho. But I do want to indicate to users that there are these objects over here on the right. So that's not readily apparent unless I adjust the zoom and adjust the center of my map. So I can go to Google Maps. And try to find the center of the states. And if you right click on a point on the map, any point at all, and then this little drop down appears, the Latin long of that point will appear at the top. You can click on it to copy it, and then jump back over to your theme and you'll paste in, I'm just going to paste all of it in, but it's pasting both the latitude and the longitude. So I only want the latitude to appear here. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the longitude, or copy it and then delete it and then paste it down here. And then you can adjust the zoom. So maybe do a zoom level of 5. That might work better for us. And I'm going to go ahead and commit these changes. While the site's updating there, I think the other thing we want to do is show when you land on an item page, how to configure the metadata that is showing up here. So this is particularly important if you have a really unique collection that isn't reflected, that its fields aren't reflected in the metadata that we have set up by default. So if you go to the data folder and you look for all of these folders within the data, or sorry, all of these files within the data folder are data files. So we looked at the YAML, but other than the theme YAML, everything else is actually a CSV. And you're using these CSVs to edit different portions of your site. Again, we have really good documentation on each of these files and how to edit each of them. So definitely check that out. But the one I'm most interested in right now is our config metadata CSV. So if I click on that one, then click my pencil button, I can see that this very first row in my CSV is the field names for the field names for this CSV, and they're reflecting the field names of my metadata. So the first column says field, and that's just pulling in below that a field name from my metadata itself. So if I go over to my metadata and I say, okay, what's not represented in my metadata on my item page so far, I can see my title, creator, date, description, subject, all of those things are there. And I could see that on the front end too, title, creator, date, description, and so on. But I can't see maybe like related publication. So that's a field that I want to show up. Is there anything else that might be? Maybe item information, since it's there for everything. If I click on item information, or if I just copy item information over the field name, and then maybe I want it to show up right underneath description. So I'll paste it in here on a new row. And then after that, you have some options as to how that field is configured. So you probably want to give it a display name. So I'll call it item information. And then these other two are optional. You can make it a browse link, which means subjects are by default browse links. So they are linked and they link back to browse. So they allow somebody looking at this object who wants to see some related objects, click on a subject and then browse for similar objects. So you can do that for any field in your metadata, but do make sure that it makes sense. Make sure it's a field that many different objects in your metadata actually have, because otherwise it wouldn't make sense to browse for just one object at a time. Right now it's just on subjects. I could do it for item information. Say true there. You also have the option to make it an external link. So there's already an example of that with our right statement that links out to the URI of the right statement. You can do that for anything. So if you have a field name, or if you have a field that is a link that you want to go somewhere else, you can turn that on by saying true for external link. Right now, I don't want to do that. I wanted to link internally to the browse page. So I've updated my metadata, or my config metadata CSV here. I can click commit changes, add item information field. Last thing I want to do is, because my the newly linked item information field on this item page, which isn't showing up yet because I haven't, my site hasn't been rebuilt completely yet. It does need, that field needs to link back to browse. So it needs to be present in some capacity on what we call the browse cards on the browse page. So right now the browse cards show certain information about each item by default. So they're pulling from specific metadata fields again. So date, creator, subjects. You can edit though what appears on the browse card. So I'm going to go into my data, click on config browse. Again, this is set up just the same as config metadata. So looking in the very first column, I see the fields. Then there's display name. There's an option to make these into buttons. So the buttons are useful, especially if you think people might browse by these things. So if you click on mailings, that shows up. That shows all the objects that have mailings as information somewhere on their browse card. You could do the same for our item information field. So I'm going to go ahead and again, copy item information, and I'll put it down below location and display name. You can see right now our subjects don't have and locations don't have display names, but maybe by display name, we mean this little bolded display name that comes before the field. So date is a good example of that. Maybe I do want a display name here. And I do want it to be a button. So my next column is going to be true. I could also make it hidden if I want to. So maybe I don't want all that information to be visible on my browse card, but I do want it to be filterable. In order for somebody to come into browse and filter for something, it does need to be added to the config browse CSV, but it doesn't necessarily need to be like visible on the front end. So that might be the case if it's a longer field, or if you already have a lot of information on your browse cards already, you have the option to make that field hidden. So I'm going to go ahead and commit change. Go back to the base of my repository and I'll show you. So my first two changes should have updated by now. If I go over and click on map, I can see that my map is now re-centered over the center of the states and also zoomed out a little bit. So that change was pretty easy to make in my theme YAML. The next thing I might want to check is the actual item pages. So if I click into an item page, I can see I have this new field, item information, so I've added that one. You can also delete fields, so any rows that you didn't want to show up, any metadata fields you don't want to show up, you just delete them out of that CSV that we looked in for item information. And now we'll see if my browse page is uploaded. I should be able to click on single page, and the browse should filter for that. So now it's happening because I've added it to the browse card. I have this item information field here, and now I can sort by these item information subjects. There are a lot of customizations you can do. I'll maybe show one more, and then we'll take some time to kind of regroup and discuss what we learned. I'll point out, I guess, that we really appreciate having contextual information about the collections we look at. It takes away that database feel and lets your users access the information from different vantage points. That's what the visualizations are doing, but that's also what you can do on the about page. And this can be a good exercise for students to do too, is to write up a little description of what is in the collection, or to actually curate some items out of the collection into an essay on the about page. So you can go to your about page. You'll need to edit this in your GitHub repository. So you can't edit the about page through the front end or anything. If your students were doing it, they would need to access the repository. But it's not. We made it pretty easy to pick up. It's in the pages folder. And within the pages folder, all of the pages of the site exist as markdown files, but you're looking for about.md, which stands for markdown. Markdown is a simple way of writing for the web that doesn't use HTML. It's actually transformed into HTML later, but instead just looks like this. It has a little bit of front matter written in YAML that just tells Jekyll what this page is and how to produce it for the front end. But then if you're looking down here in the actual code itself or the text itself, you're looking at some pretty basic ways of writing that you and I write, every day in emails or in documents. We're giving sections headings just as you would in HTML with an H1 or H2, so on, direct screen readers and separate portions of your text according to the content. But instead of encoding that with HTML tags, you're using pound signs at the beginning. So this is an H2 that shows up on the front end looking like this. Below that, you're not having to encode anything in HTML, you're just writing a paragraph as you normally would a paragraph. Right now there's a big button in there, which looks maybe intimidating, but you can just delete that. If you're actually going in and writing, your own content, you could probably just delete everything that's in here and then, or not delete the very front matter, but anything below that you delete and then, write your own content. You can also include images from your collection as well. We have documentation on that in our docs, so definitely check those out. Commit my changes. We'll just say, yeah, update about. You can update the homepage. Pretty much anything in here is updatable. Check out our walkthrough, check out our docs, reach out with questions. I know this last part was pretty quick. We really wanted to focus on the option of having that live metadata update. That was sort of the purpose of this workshop, but we do have other workshops in the future that we'll teach and lots of documentation that show you how to get into this other aspect of Collection Builder, customizing the site. And I think that's it for me. Any questions, thoughts, concerns?
Yeah, feel free to unmute as well. During this part is just really questions, discussions. Oh, we have a question in the chat now. Is it possible to edit, for example, the browse page, to include a series of example buttons or interpretive guiding text for how to interact with the browse page?
Yeah, so each of those pages is a little markdown file in the repository. And so you can essentially put some interpretive text above where the browse is, browsingness is. So yeah, that's a good point. You could put in yeah, the little interpretive thing like how put your search term here and click filter to filter the items. So that's totally possible, and it's pretty easy because it's just the markdown files to edit. That goes for all of those pages in terms of the browse, the subject terms, and the about page and the table, I believe, are easy to edit. The map one is a full screen thing. I can't remember if it automatically pulls in the content or not. I think it doesn't. So that's the only one that would take a little bit more work.
Another thing we wanted to point out is that we do have some community spaces like a Slack channel that some of you might already be in, and then a Google group as well. And the link is in the outline, but I'll also post it in the chat just with more information about them. And there's a button on that page to like sign up for those spaces. It's just a good place to like connect, ask questions. You can even like potentially meet project collaborators or just, chat about what you're working on. And we also have been doing like little monthly Zoom meetups with just a few folks talking about different things. We've had one about like making an oral history collection or one about just like teaching with Collection Builder. And, we focus on different collection builder templates, different ways to utilize them. So it's just a cool way to get involved. And we always welcome new folks.
Does anybody do teaching with some kind of digital collection platform like Omeka or something like that at this point?
Show of hands.
Yes. Yeah, I teach Omeka pretty heavily, and if I'm partnering with a course on a project, it's at least 3 instruction sessions, full classes. So I'm looking forward to this. I don't want to call it easier, but Omeka can have a very steep learning curve. But definitely with this I would have to teach GitHub and Pages first. But thank you. This was a great workshop.
Thanks, Colleen. Yeah, I would say for us, that's actually kind of how we started. Is like we would teach like Omeka with the students, and the thing that was different is that we just spent a lot of time having to like maintain that Omeka instance and add a whole bunch of users and stuff. And so
Exactly.
at
Yeah.
this point, like we've done it with classes where they actually have their own repositories and customize their own little group collections. But we've also done it where the only thing that they really interact with is digitization and then writing the metadata in the spreadsheet,
Mm-hmm.
which from my perspective as a librarian was actually a lot easier and less to
Yeah.
maintain. And they still learn. What we found is, like the history students hadn't worked in spreadsheets. And so it was still like a really good like
Sure.
skills kind of thing. And then besides just the literacy of digital collections and understanding that description is created by people and it's subject to interpretation and things like that. So there's a lot of good critical literacy skills there too. So I think that you can also really stage it in different ways. Like if you
Yeah.
don't want them messing around with GitHub at all, it's totally possible.
Just
But
looking at the spreadsheet and the metadata, finding their images that they
mhm.
want to use. I mean, those are some valuable literacies alone.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I like the spreadsheet forces them to essentially have a backup of their data. With Omeka, I try to have the students, I develop a word-based template for them with the required metadata that their
Okay.
professor is asking for in the class project, and hope they use that template. But I'm certain a number of the students just type right in the WYSIWYG, and then what happens if the site goes down?
That's a good point.
So I like this approach.
Cool.
Yeah, it's also been helpful for classes that do want to engage more with like web development or storytelling. You can like not have them focus so much on the metadata, but just get into what is this, what is GitHub, and then how do I write Markdown and really focus on that instead. So having that sort of modular approach to with this group, they really need to focus on this one thing rather than having to worry about start to finish build a site. That is a great use of Collection Builder too, to really focus in on either metadata or another, one of many other different parts of it.
Thanks.
Happy to see some other folks in chat sharing about using this as a student project for archives or for having it as a different option for Omeka sites. It's always cool to hear. We have had quite a few students use this as, as student projects. As at University of Idaho, we have student fellowships that will, they'll work on digital scholarship projects. I'll share some of the CDIL projects too, as well as just to like look through things people have done. I think this is the first time we've ever like not run over on time. I'm like so proud of this. Oh yeah, and Olivia linked to some things, teaching resources and Learn Static as well, which are really cool.
So Julia Phoebe asked how she might find out about how they might
Oh
find out about
yeah.
another workshop.
If you join those community spaces, we definitely will promote them through there, like through the Slack and through the Google group. I send out like a monthly just like update little like email about things coming up. So I think that would be a good way to do it. I don't know if we've never really done this, but maybe on our website we could post things that are happening. But I'm not sure if that's something we'll do in the future, but definitely, and if you are in like listserv spaces, like Digital Library Federation, like DLF, or the AHSI, Digital Humanities Summer Institute, those listservs, we often will post about opportunities as well. And yeah, Evan posted that at DHSI, there's an intensive week-long version of, a collection builder workshop, which Katie was in. And so, yeah, that is a really great way to, become more well-versed in all things collection builder. And you get to be in Victoria, BC, which is beautiful. And Code for Lib, there will be a workshop, a half-day workshop at that conference in Michigan as well. Thanks, Katie. She testified. It is a great workshop.
The HSI is just fun because it's a lovely trip to Victoria. You get to go hiking and enjoy the ocean.
I'm planning to go to the librarians course among those 2 weeks, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah,
Awesome.
it's just fun.
So unless someone else has a question, I have a question for this group, but my colleague might have already reached out to Julia. I'm not sure if she reached out yet or not, but I'm part of a Mellon Foundation funded Digital Ethnic Studies, Digital Humanities Grant Project at California State University, Fullerton.
Oh yeah, was that Jamila?
Jamila.
Yeah.
Yes, we're going to reach out to ask you guys to teach a version of this workshop for our fellows cohort. My big concern with that group is, other than one of them, who happens to be our awesome programmer for the library, they are not familiar with GitHub and Pages.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that I will have the time in the next month to teach that to them on top of the other teaching I'm going to do for them. So if we had your team do a virtual workshop for us, you mentioned, I think, Evan, that you could, teaching just the sheets part, the metadata and the images is a possibility or how would you guys, do you do a version that doesn't get so heavy into GitHub, or can you also tack on that GitHub piece to a workshop like this?
Yeah, it's always a complicated in terms of the time, trying to figure out how much time you can spend on it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that would be a yeah, I don't know. So yeah, it's totally possible.
Sure.
I guarantee you that it is. But, and we've done that. We've done that with our. We used to do like a faculty fellows symposium with grad students and faculty, and essentially that's what we would do is kind of just get them into it and then reiterate just by doing it multiple times, and that kind of gets you familiar with it. And like I said in the chat too, I think the key is having something that they're actually motivated to want to do so that they learn it. Otherwise, it's so abstract to talk about GitHub and Git, and it's just like, yeah, I don't get it. And it's like, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. But if we do this a couple times in a row, then it makes it, it's like at least we understand what we're doing.
Okay. I'll chat with Paul about it, but
Sure,
I definitely want to be able to offer this.
Cool.
Yeah, and I would say it'd be great to chat more so we could kind of hear what the the project is, what the use case is, and we could sort of tailor it to kind of fit that. And we also have, there's other options. Julia's made a lot of really great walkthroughs that don't take that long to go through, that maybe like the participants could walk through ahead of time so they had some familiarity. It wouldn't be just completely starting
Sure.
from scratch.
Yeah.
So there's different ways that we could approach that sort of prep work that wouldn't be too much of a burden, I think.
Thank you. I will be teaching them Omeka. So
Oh, wow.
thank you. This was great.
Yeah, thank you all for having us.
Yeah, thanks so
and,
much. Thank
feel
you,
free
Katie.
to connect on our community spaces and GitHub discussions and all that stuff, and have fun building collections.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Olivia. This was a great workshop, and it was so great to have you, and all of our participants today too. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Ciao.